Hello, Management 6722. My name is Sujin Patel, and with Kristen D'Souza, Travis Jernigan, Nicholas Morrison, and Oksana Seeley, we're going to be presenting the company Nucor Steel. Nucor Steel is the largest steel producer in the United States. It has a Fortune 500 rating. Nucor Steel prides itself in being unconventional. It is innovative in the use of electric arc furnaces and mini mills. The mini mills replaced the traditional blast furnaces. They relied more on scrap metal as the main source as opposed to iron ore to produce steel. The electric arc furnaces, a 90 to 150 megawatt powerhouse, could transform high volumes of scrap and iron into liquid steel fast and efficiently, much faster than the conventional processes. These were both innovations from Nucor Steel. Nucor Steel also prides itself in being unconventional with its very minimal management layers for the size of the company. Nucor Steel has 200 operating facilities in North America. However, it manages these facilities with only 100 people at the corporate headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. The history of Nucor traces back to 1905. It evolved through successive companies through mergers and acquisitions. Its origin started with the Rio Motor Company related to Oldsmobile, which evolved eventually into Nuclear Corporation of America, and then became Volcraft, the first whole steel company that became a supplier for joists and girders, and then eventually the name changed to Nucor Steel in 1971.
I will speak about Porter's five forces as well as the forces' impact on the attractiveness of the industry. So one of the aspects is that there is a low threat of new entrants. That means that the industry is mature and well established. Right now there is going on some consolidation of U.S. firms as well as exit of some major firms, which all create some opportunity for growth. There is also low threat of substitute products, which all helps to appeal as far as the industry. There is an increasing demand for steel and steel products. All customers are major established companies such as automaking and some other manufacturing firms. There is a large market size as well as international and domestic, so all of those are the positives of the industry. There is a high bargaining power of consumers, which could potentially be a matter of concern, as well as create some additional opportunity, such as opportunity to capitalize on the cost leadership, as well as the opportunity to increase the market share based on the consistency, variety, and quality of the products offered. The high bargaining power of suppliers is also a matter of concern, although it does create for an opportunity for high supplier-seller collaboration and drives down the price, as well as it lowers the shipping costs. Positives. There's also intense industry competition, which drives down the price overall and could be. The main industry driving forces are technical and social. The main economic downsides of the steel industry is the increasing cost of steel scrap, as well as the tighter profit margins, increased competition in US and globally, as well as the fact that this industry is labor and energy intensive. Political pressures on steel manufacturers include the increasing demand to be environmentally conscious, taxes and fines to comply with the environmental impact, as well as the pressures from the green movements to be progressively more cleaner and develop new technologies to comply with. Environmental pressures include increasing number of the groups fighting against pollution, and as well as the pressure to be cleaner, so to speak, and the cost of complying with such laws could be quite extensive, which are all downsides of being in such a business. The technological opportunities in steel industry includes the pressure to advance existing technologies. Those are sort of downside, as well as the actually an opportunity in such industry. the opportunity to increase the variety of products offered, as well as advancing technology consistently and increase the uniformity of products offered, as well as increase the quality. There are social pressures on steel manufacturers, such as the clean production, as I've already mentioned, the number of growing green movements, and the pressure from other environmental groups. The main industry characteristics are that it's a mature industry, low number of new entrants. It's highly cyclical, which is sort of a downside because it moves up and down with the economy. There's the existing opportunity of increasing the market share by purchasing existing companies, which all creates opportunity and adds to the attractiveness of the industry. It is a labor intensive industry, so the need for workforce and so forth could be considered as a negative. And there's also a need for advanced technology and clean production, and both of those are potentially positive. That creates opportunity for growth, for development of new technologies, and advancing the production towards being green and creating more market share.
The steel industry has a commodity nature of pricing, which means that Nucor has to adopt a low-cost provider approach. In order to keep competitive pricing, Nucor is known for a few strategies in keeping costs down. Nucor keeps the price at market, but keeps the cost of production low to maintain a good net profit. Nucor is also known for using production methods that are technologically advanced. Advanced technology helps Nucor maintain plant efficiency that will keep costs low in the long run. Nucor has a strategy of employee satisfaction. Satisfied employees will be more efficient, which will keep production costs down. Employee satisfaction also reduces employee training and turnover costs. Lastly, Nucor strives to maintain the same strategy throughout all employee hierarchy levels. Nucor does not allow extravagant gifts for high-level employees. Nucor uses the top-down approach when reducing employee costs. Nucor has to maintain a strong competitive advantage in the steel market because of competitive pricing and strong competitors such as U.S. Steel. Nucor is able to compete with low costs that are comparable to other steel producers. Low costs also help Nucor to maintain a good net profit. As stated before, Nucor invests in technology that helps with efficiency, but also keeps them as a leader in the steel production industry. Nucor has a competitive advantage by buying up competition to continue as the leader in steel production. Nucor shifted its focus from lower-end steel products to value-added products, which gives Nucor a broad market for steel consumers. Nucor strives not only to be the lead in steel production, but also to be environmentally safe. This helps increase public image. Lastly, Nucor uses its American-based production as a unique quality. Nucor finds it very important to keep production in the U.S. and to employ American citizens and boost the economy. Now I'm going to hand it over to Nick, who is going to talk about success factors.
Nucor Steel owes its success over the past several decades, one of them being innovation. In 1968, Darling Mill was one of the first plants of major size in the U.S. to use the electric arc furnace. The electric arc furnace was attractive because the labor and capital requirements to melt steel scrap and produce crude steel were far lower than those at conventional integrated steel mills. In the late 1980s, the Crawfordsville plant was the first to employ a revolutionary thin slab casting process. This substantially reduced necessary capital investments and cost. Forbes magazine described Nucor's pioneer use of thin slab casting as the most substantial technological industrial innovation in the past 50 years. Innovation allowed Nucor to be a low-cost producer. Their low-cost leadership strategy allowed them to compete on the international landscape against foreign manufacturers, which had traditionally been the lowest cost producers in the market. Innovation and low cost for Nucor can be attributed to their sound management. They were able to post a dividend for 156 straight quarters. Ken Iverson was described as a model company president. Nucor was able to successfully streamline their organizational structure. When looking at innovation, when looking at their low cost and sound management, this really can be wrapped up to two key factors: their ability to execute on strategy and their great leadership. When looking at their SWOT analysis, we can see that Nucor has a leading market position in North America, a diversified and balanced product mix, a robust production network. They are unfortunately dependent on outside vendors for raw materials, and there is strong competition with international imports. There's an opportunity for strategic acquisitions and expansions, as well as robust growth perspectives in the U.S. steel market. There is intense competition. Greenhouse gas regulation is going to be key for this industry, as well as there's an overcapacity in the global steel industry. When looking at their strengths relative to their weaknesses, weighing the opportunities and threats that face Nucor, we see a key market opportunity being acquisitions and joint ventures. Nucor has a proven track record in this space. Yamato Kogyo, a major Japanese producer, allowed them to gain access to the structural steel segment. Several years later, they opened together the largest structural beam facility in the Western Hemisphere. Harris Steel had over 70 fabrication facilities in the U.S., and this more than doubled their rebar fabrication capacity. Companies that do not have the scales of economy or robust product mix are highly susceptible to volatile prices. Nucor has proven to weather these storms and position themselves for expansionary times. We see this continuing to be the biggest market opportunity for Nucor moving forward.
All right, now we're going to look at the financial situation. I'll start off with the net earnings numbers for Nucor and its biggest U.S. competitor, United States Steel. Also, later on, I want to look at a company called Bao Steel, which is the second largest steel manufacturer in the world and is based in China. We can see in the early 2000s, Nucor is doing well, while United States Steel seems to be struggling to turn a profit. It's during this time that Nucor has used its resources to acquire companies such as Auburn Steel, Harris Steel, ITEX Steel, and many others to expand their product lines and supply capabilities. We see in 2004 there's a sharp jump in earnings for both manufacturers. We see Nucor also has a somewhat steady increase with the exception of 2007, while United States Steel seems to be fluctuating year to year. In 2009, of course, we see the economic downturn effects on both companies, with United States Steel being hit much harder. We also notice that Nucor is able to turn around earnings quickly, while United States Steel struggles to recover from these losses. I wanted to save Bao Steel until now because they are in a different situation than both of the United States-based companies. Bao Steel is government-owned, and as you can see, they post strong earnings even in times when U.S. companies are losing money. This is an issue that Nucor has struggled with and complains that the government-owned company has an advantage of domestic government subsidies and currency manipulation. With this in mind, we're just going to focus on some more numbers from the U.S. company. Looking at earnings per share, we notice that United States Steel has large highs as well as large lows. This is also evident from the net earnings numbers. Taking a look at return on equity shows the same thing, with United States Steel showing a high of 43% and a low of negative 12%. Nucor seems to be more stable and able to bounce back from struggles. The current ratio, though, shows that United States Steel has an advantage of being able to better pay off its short-term debt. But again, looking at the debt-to-equity ratio, we see that Nucor looks to be pretty stable. But we also notice an increase in 2010, presumably as the company has taken on a little more debt in order to invest in the future. But United States Steel shows an alarming increase each year, and these numbers indicate that Nucor's strategies are both sound and sustainable. Now we'll take a look at some of the issues that Nucor is facing. Rising scrap steel costs, as we discussed earlier, is an issue for all steel manufacturers. Nucor is reliant on vendors for these raw materials and subsequently has no control over these costs. With costs rising constantly and fluctuating frequently, feel that there is an opportunity here to acquire vendors and lessen this cost. The second issue is acquiring domestic market share. As we discussed earlier, not only does Nucor have to compete with United States companies, foreign imports are a big part of the U.S. market in steel. Here's a look at some of the crude steel production around the globe. As we see, China has nearly 50% of the world's steel. We feel that there's an opportunity here also to look in some countries such as India and Russia and use the same strategies that have made Nucor this successful so far and acquire some manufacturers in those countries to acquire more foreign market share. And now we're going to have Sujin with our recommendations.
Thanks, Travis. Now for the recommendations. Our recommendations stem mainly in mergers and acquisitions. Historically, Nucor Steel is the company it is today with the economies of scale and the technology and innovation through mergers and acquisitions of multiple companies since 1905. We believe that Nucor Steel should continue this path. It should continue this path to mitigate foreign competition cost advantage. As stated by Travis earlier, Russia, India, and South Korea have similar market shares. However, they benefit from a cost structure with lower labor costs and regulations. We believe that Nucor Steel should try to expand and move some operations overseas to foreign countries to enjoy similar lower labor costs and regulations in order to maintain its competitiveness with foreign companies. These foreign companies, as mentioned earlier, also have governmental backup, which we know is something that is not possible with Nucor Steel. The next reason for mergers and acquisitions would be to thwart supplier power. As mentioned by Oksana earlier, the suppliers have a high bargaining power with Nucor Steel. This can be turned into an opportunity simply through working with material suppliers, either through acquisition or some level of collaboration with raw material suppliers. Nucor Steel and the final steel products are highly dependent on raw materials, especially scrap metal, which makes Nucor Steel unique compared to other steel companies, including U.S. Steel. This collaboration with raw material suppliers or through acquisitions of raw material suppliers create vertical integration in the supply chain. Nucor Steel would no longer be dependent on the costs and the supplies and demands that are affected by the raw material suppliers. Lastly, Nucor Steel should invest in product mix diversification. There is some cyclical nature, as mentioned by Nick, with the Nucor product sales. Some of these cyclical natures is either based on product supply and demand or economic downturns. With diversification, you would see more leveling of the cyclical nature. In addition, it would also combat substitute threats. Oksana did mention that there are some substitute threats are present and they are low threat. However, Nucor Steel should look around the corner, especially at substitute threats such as aluminum, and try to obtain some ownership of the aluminum supply chain. A 2011 survey by Drucker declared that in 2009, each automobile manufacturer used 327 pounds of aluminum per vehicle. This is expected to increase to 555 pounds in 2025. Nucor Steelers, again, should look around the corner and look at also take this threat as an opportunity to invest in the supply chain of substitute threats, such as aluminum. Our references.